Okay. Well, good evening, or for those of you in the States, good afternoon, and for those of you in California, good morning. I'm going to hand over to Rand in a moment. He's going to do most of the talking tonight, which given the state of my voice is probably a really good thing. Swing Time, a celebration of golf and music, is a big book, as Hannah just demonstrated. It runs to 324 pages and has 180 color illustrations of sheet music in it. Rand and I had a lot of fun writing it. We tried to convey this in the book. We can only tell you a few stories from Swing Time this evening. And time is tight, so without further ado, I'm going to let Rand get started. So Peter, exit stage right.
Peter, thank you. So in the early 2000s, and these were the years when I was serving as the historian and the librarian for the USGA, I stumbled upon this really extensive bibliography of baseball music. No, we're not going to talk about baseball music tonight, but I found this amazing sort of compilation of baseball music that was put together through a collaboration of baseball historians and the music division of the Library of Congress here in Washington, D.C. It's really a very impressive list. Some songs that are really well known. I suspect even Take Me Out to the Ball Game may be known by some of our friends in the UK. At that time, the USGA library had a modest collection of about 30 pieces of golf sheet music. And I found myself asking some questions. Is it possible that there was once a tradition of golf music that was as extensive and as rich as the 1,400 citations that comprise this baseball music bibliography? Spoiler alert.
Oh, sorry, Rand. Can you unmute, please? Thank you. I think that's you now. Sorry about that.
No, I'm unmuted.
Yeah, that's great. I think we just
Is that
lost.
better?
Yeah, just lost you first.
Is that better? Okay. We hope to show you this evening just how rich and fascinating this history of golf music is. From the 1870s until the start of the Second World War, music publishing houses in the United States and in Great Britain principally, but also in continental Europe. The two images on the screen on the left side are both published in France in the late 1800s. In Australia, even South America, published sheet music with golf themes. Some of these simply featured golf motifs in the cover illustration. Some were songs with just passing references to golf in the lyrics, but many featured songs with references to golf in the title, with golf as the primary subject matter in the lyrics and with exquisite illustrations of golfers on the covers. Once hugely popular, selling tens of thousands and in a few cases, millions of copies, this remarkable body of golf music is today largely unknown. The ephemeral nature of sheet music has rendered examples of golf sheet music exceedingly rare. Only a single known copy survives for many of the songs we'll be sharing this evening. That includes the three that you see on the screen today. The paper on which sheet music was printed was cheap. The flimsy nature of the paper was likely to tear, to chip, to stain. Moreover, as any follower of popular culture knows and understands, tastes change rapidly, especially musical tastes. And what was yesterday a big hit song is likely today out of favor and probably forgotten tomorrow. At the turn of the century, there were veritable factories of music composition in New York and London that churned out tunes by the hundreds each day. Sophisticated marketing and sales networks pushed these new songs to consumers swiftly. Golfers consumed them voraciously, but discarded them all too quickly. If surviving copies of sheet music are rare, collections of golf sheet music are more unusual. Several universities here in the United States and Great Britain, together with some of the grandest national libraries on the planet, preserve just a few pieces of golf sheet music among their holdings, but the numbers really are quite small. One particularly fine collection has been assembled by the noted golf course architect Mike Herzen, who was the co-designer of Erin Hills that was host to the 2017 US Open. And the two pieces on the right side on this screen are both from Mike's personal collection. At this point, the largest and finest collection really belongs to the USGA'S Golf Museum and Library in New Jersey, with more than 250 examples of golf sheet music. For years, the USGA'S collection of sheet music sat on the archive shelves, pretty much untouched by researchers or by the curatorial team. Still, the items in the collection begged a couple of really important questions, which we're going to seek to address this evening. First, what's the earliest known golf song? Second, just how many golf songs have been written? And third, why? Why were golf songs written and where was this music played? So let's take a look at the oldest song that we've been able to uncover. On Thursday, we have the exact date for the premiere of this song. On Thursday, February 25th, 1669, Samuel Peeps, the well-known diarist, the high-ranking civil servant in London, took his wife and his daughters to see the premiere of a new play, which was called The Royal Shepherdist, written by Thomas Shadwell. The music for the songs in the play was composed by John Bannister. Peeps, it turns out, was not particularly impressed by the show. He wrote in his now famous diary that the play was, quote, the silliest for words and design and everything that ever I saw in my whole life. Royal Shepherdist was an Arcadian tragic comedy, but the plot's not really important for us this evening. In the second scene of the third act, and there were 5 acts, a group of shepherds and shepherdesses appeared on stage. They sang 2 consecutive songs, and the second is the one that interests us most. The stage directions here specified that, quote, here the shepherds and shepherdesses take hands round and dance as they sing the following song, which had 4 verses. The song opened with these lines on the screen. It was, and you'll have to trust Peter and I on this particular point, quite a bawdy song. Giving a lass a green gown was a euphemism for behaving in a very naughty manner with young maidens. And perhaps because of this, the song had a considerable life after the Royal Shepherdist. It was published in song collections twice in 1671, again in 1676, 1679, 1691, 1713, just sort of over and over. The most important version of the song appeared in the 1676 publication, which contained both Shadwell's lyrics and Bannister's music. And that makes, and to each pretty lass we give a green gown, the earliest documented golf-related song. Music, it turns out, and specifically the singing of songs, played a very important role in the social life of early golfing societies and clubs. These social and athletic institutions, as many of you understand, emerged in the middle of the 18th century in major golf centers like Edinburgh and St. Andrews. Golfers, after a day on links, extended their camaraderie, their social interactions to a local inn or a tavern, where, and newspaper accounts record this for us, copious quantities of food were ingested, much alcohol was imbibed, speeches were made, poems were recited, and songs were sung. George Ford Carnegie's really delightful ode to golf, Golf Vienna, privately printed in Leith in 1833, paints a really evocative image of contemporary club life, including this very specific reference to singing golf in most majestic strain. Turns out there are, in fact, a number of late 18th and 19th century texts that confirm both the writing and the singing of golf songs within these early golfing societies. As historians of the game appreciate, the first edition of Thomas Matheson's mock epic poem, The Golf, published in 1743, is important in and of itself, as being the first text entirely devoted to golf. Of interest to the golf music historian, however, is the 1793 third edition, which has an appendix that includes 2 golf songs, Song in Praise of Golf and The Golfers. The full lyrics of the songs were provided, signifying these as the two earliest golf songs, and I differentiate that from "And to Eat's Pretty Lass," which simply contained a passing reference to golf in the lyrics. These are the two earliest full golf songs that come down to us today. Unfortunately, Peter Hill, who was the editor of the third edition, didn't include the name of the authors of the songs. He identified them only as the gentlemen. Nonetheless, the information supplied in the text illuminates a really important aspect of many of these early golf songs, which is that these songs were not original compositions musically, but in fact were new golf-themed lyrics that were written to accompany an already well-known tune. The earliest golf songs with original music compositions wouldn't emerge until about a century later, in the last decades of the 1800s. Golf music evolved well beyond the songs of the early golfing societies and clubs in the closing decades of the 19th century. It spread geographically to England, to continental Europe, to North America, alongside the spread of the game and alongside the spread of the culture that accompanied the game. It spread into the home, into the dance hall, music halls, theaters that defined the Victorian era. Notably, a really large number of golf songs were published in the United States and the United Kingdom as sheet music, beginning in the 1870s. We've found more than 400 examples now of sheet music featuring golf songs, golf-themed imagery, or with references to golf in the lyrics that were published between 1875 and 1940, with the largest concentration of this publishing activity happening between 1890 and 1910. This cascade of golf sheet music really can be attributed to the confluence of two important developments. The first is the burgeoning sheet music industry that emerged in the 1880s. And the second is the contemporary surge in popularity of golf that lasted for several decades. So let's look at sheet music for a moment. Before the 1880s, popular music was published in a pretty limited and a casual way for small audiences. Songs of the American Civil War, and there's two examples here on the screen. Patriotic songs, sentimental ballads, these were the types of songs that were most common, generally printed with fairly simple black and white covers. But what was happening at the time is that the piano was becoming very quickly a fixture in middle-class homes, both in the United Kingdom and in the United States. It was a symbol of success, it was a symbol of prestige, and families often encouraged their children to study the piano as part of their education. It became really common for families and friends to gather around the piano in the parlor as after dinner entertainment to sing and play what became to be known as parlor songs. The piano and piano music equally extended beyond the home to restaurants and bars, to theaters, social clubs, athletic clubs, and country clubs, really just about anywhere that people gathered. As one social historian of popular music explained, and I love this quote, he said, "It was an exuberant, marching, dancing, singing America that greeted the dawn of the 20th century." The industry that rose up to feed this extraordinary demand for popular songs and sheet music came to be known as Tin Pan Alley. And in fact, it had a home, it had a location on West 28th Street in New York City. This is where publishers, composers, lyricists, artists who churned out the songs and published and marketed the new sheet music gathered. Importantly, printing technology and specifically it was the development of offset lithography in the late 1800s had advanced to the point where sheet music could be mass printed in very large quantities and at prices that made it readily accessible and available to the general public. So music was now quite affordable. Sales of some songs exceeded 2 million copies as early as the 1890s. It's remarkable numbers. By 1910, sheet music sales just in America alone reached 30 million copies per year. And perhaps most impressively, the number I found, Tin Pan Alley produced, by one estimate, 1,650,000 songs from the 1890s until the middle of the 20th century. So just had this industry that was churning them out an amazing amount of product to people who were just, mass consuming music. Successful sheet music publishers closely monitored trends in popular culture and society for song ideas. And the Tin Pan Alley composers responded immediately to any sort of new development and fad in popular culture with a new composition that reflected these trends. These same composers responded equally to changing tastes in music styles, and especially in dance forms. And so you see, as new dances became popular, the waltz, the march, the two-step, the tango, that the composers were responding very immediately with golf-themed compositions. Tin Pan Alley really paid careful attention to the news, to personalities, to fashion of the day, and any trend that was popular. And they created songs where the titles and the lyrics reflected anything and just about everything that was au courant. The cover, and I love this particular piece, for John Duss's America Up to Date, reveals one illustrator's impression of the most significant innovations and fads of the day. If your screen is large enough, you might notice that there's a telephone, a typewriter, a railroad, horse racing, bicycling, baseball, and of course, and I've enlarged the details so you can see it well, golf. In Great Britain, and initially, and soon thereafter in the United States, and of course elsewhere around the world, this golden age of sheet music was in fact the era of the great golf boom. The game had developed, as we know, on the links land along the Scottish coastline at some point prior to the 15th century. But in England, it was still considered an idiosyncratic and somewhat mysterious Scottish pastime as late as the 1860s. Over the course of the 3 decades that followed, the stature, the reputation, the visibility of golf expanded dramatically. Some numbers to back that up. In all of Britain, there were about 24 clubs in 1851 and at least 290 by 1889. So in 40 years, tenfold growth from 24 to 290. New club foundations grew rapidly thereafter, so that by 1900, so just 10 years later, there were more than 1,300. So we go from 24 to 290 to 1,300 clubs in the British Isles. In just 50 years. A similar story can be told for the United States. Early documents and newspapers confirm that golf was established among British communities, largely comprising Scots, in Charleston, South Carolina in the 1780s, and Savannah, Georgia in the 1790s. There was then a hiatus that lasted several decades before golf resurfaced in some really diverse communities: Estes Park, Colorado in 1875, Burlington, Iowa, he's in the heart of the country in 1883, Foxburg, Pennsylvania, 1885. Once the game was reestablished in the 1880s, it grew steadily as well in the US. In December of 1894, when the USGA was organized, there were about 50 golf clubs in the United States. By 1900, so 5 years later, there were more than 1,000 golf courses, with at least one golf course in each of the then 45 states. So you can see that sort of similar orders of magnitude growth in the game's popularity, again, in the same exact decades that this sort of craze in sheet music publishing was happening. As golf penetrated the landscapes, the physical landscapes of the British Isles and the United States, equally the European continent, it penetrated many corners of the home and of communities. And the evidence for this is really abundant. This is what our museums thrive on, right? Beginning in the 1890s, golf motifs began to appear on utilitarian objects ranging from dishware to silverware, from table lamps to teapots. Golfers were also learning to consume the game away from the golf course. The number of golf books published in the 1890s increased more than 6-fold over the previous decade. The first magazines dedicated solely to golf appeared in the United Kingdom in 1890, in the United States in 1895. Stories about the game were appearing regularly in major newspapers and popular magazines for the first time. In short, if you lived in the UK or the US in the 1890s, golf was pretty hard to miss. And the composers, the lyricists, the publishers of popular music, those who were looking for the latest and greatest craze and trend saw in golf a craze that was sweeping both the American and the European continents. So to appreciate the evolution of golf music from the 1870s to the onset of World War II, one really does have to understand the evolution of popular music. The two histories really are inextricable. Today, of course, we're accustomed to the seemingly ubiquitous presence of music. This thanks to broadcast and satellite radio, to digital streaming services. But listeners in the 19th and early 20th centuries encountered music far less frequently. If you set to the side liturgical music, which is really the only part of music, branch of music that isn't relevant for this particular study of golf music, even though I would point out that golf for many of us is a religion, we can examine 4 genres of music that were popular at the turn of the 20th century, and that really helps inform our understanding of why golf songs were written and where they were performed. So dance music, we'll start with dance music. Most of the golf music from the 1880s, the 1890s, the first decade of the 20th century took the form of dance music. Polkas, gallops, gavottes, schottisches, quadrilles, especially waltzes. Huge number of golf waltzes were written. This observation, of course, isn't unique to golf music, but reflects what was happening in the music industry, which was responding to very significant social and recreational activity of the day. Stated pretty simply and directly, most American and British popular music of the late Victorian era was dance music that reflected the various social functions of dancing in communities. For several centuries, social dancing among the elite and the upwardly mobile was dominated by what is referred to as the Contra Dance and its various offshoots, in which teams of dancers formed geometric figures, such as lines and circles and squares. This is what we see in all the sort of 19th century Victorian revival movies and television series these days, with only the slightest moments of physical contact between the dancers. Toward the end of the 19th century, there was a pretty dramatic shift away from these more formal and geometric dances in favor of couples dancing. The waltz, popular in Europe from the 1700s, increasingly popular in the United States after the 1820s, demanded a lot of physical contact and energy. For a while, it was regarded as a fairly indecorous exhibition of intimacy between men and women. But by the end of the 19th century, the waltz was not just accepted in the US and the UK, but in fact was celebrated really as the ultimate symbol of romance and courtship and sophistication, with its very smooth and graceful lines and this beautiful lilting musical accompaniment. Understandably, whoops, did I lose a slide? Okay, I'm gonna stay on this slide. Understandably, the music of the ballroom also entered the home. Waltzes in particular, but in fact, just about any form of dance music were played on the family piano. Amateur piano players typically sought music that was simpler in form and easy to play, and the waltz certainly fit that bill. The same families who purchased pianos for their home and paid for music instruction for their children served as the target market for many of these sentimental tunes. These were works that were designed and written to pull on the heartstrings without requiring an inordinate amount of support from the fingers on the keys. Military music, band music, another important genre that we see in golf music. Military bands had been around since the birth of the United States, but their numbers increased substantially during the American Civil War. Bands were really mainstays both of the Union and the Confederate armies. Historians estimate that the United States Army counted at least 500 brass bands comprising an estimated 9,000 musicians during the war years, and that the Southern armies sustained just a slightly smaller number, so large numbers of musicians on the battlefield. Some of these military bands survived and flourished in the post-war decades, but largely the musicians were decommissioned. After the war, they returned home to form bands in their local communities. And this was a great age of organizing of community bands, college and university bands, city governments, schools, churches, businesses. Just about everyone was forming brass bands in local communities. Any town worth its reputation constructed a bandstand in the community park. Harper's Weekly, which is a tremendous resource, and it's a newspaper that reported on sort of life and happenings around the country, reported that there were more than 10,000 brass bands in the United States in 1889, and that by 1920, the United States had more than 40,000 bands with more than 1 million members. So obviously music, marches in particular, had to be written. They were popular for these musical groups. The brass band movement of the late 19th century drew energy in particular from the interaction of patriotism and popular culture, as well in the United States as a growing sense of American nationalism. Such sentiments fueled the popularity of military marches. This was the age of John Philip Sousa, who many of you likely know. Stars and Stripes Forever became a cornerstone of American popular music. The march, as well as themes of patriotic, of national pride, American exceptionalism, these carried over into golf sheet music. And here we see somewhat anomalous, but a representation of Uncle Sam and Columbia, that was a female personification of America, popular at the time, that appeared on the cover of this, The Golfers March in Two-Step, that was published in 1898. Songs that were sung, another genre. Prior to the 1880s, the music publishing industry was dominated by a small number of well-established firms who focused really on the distribution of classical music, genteel parlor songs that typically were pretty complex musically, overly sentimental in tone, but public tastes were changing, both in the United States and in Great Britain. As people looked ahead to the coming of the new century, consumers increasingly favored music that was a little more exciting musically, that addressed contemporary themes with a contemporary voice. As proudly proclaimed on the cover of The Sun Shines on No Sweeter Girl Than Mine, these tunes were composed intentionally as, quote, songs that are sung. The songs typically included 3 main sections or strophes, each comprising a verse and a chorus. The chorus was often expanded. The instrumentation was simplified. Typically, it announces the title of the song, not once, but often twice, helping to embed the title of the song in the listener's memory. And generally, in melodic terms, it's the catchiest part of the song, written to lodge itself into the audience's consciousness. Among the golf songs, No More of Your Golfing for Me, written by an Irish duo, which I just love, stands out for a rousing beer hall type chorus that's musically differentiated from the verses. It's easier to play and importantly, easier to sing. And of course, it doesn't just introduce, but emphasizes the song's title. So how do you sell a golf song? Well, the covers. The covers are a really important piece of this artistic form. Central to the successful marketing of late 19th and early 20th century sheet music were the bright colors, the rich images on the covers that provided context and meaning for many of the compositions. Music publishing houses really took note that an attractive cover would sell more copies. So they capitalized on the power of the art. They commissioned both well-known, sometimes anonymous artists to create illustrations that would catch the eye and pique the interest of would-be buyers. Importantly, the publishers understood that these buyers included musicians and music aficionados, but they also included people who simply collected sheet music because they treasured the cover illustrations for their artistic appeal or because the theme resonated with a personal interest. As I said before, the great majority of songs written were written to accompany popular dances, and they were strictly musical in form. In other words, these were compositions that lacked lyrics, which connected the song with a specific subject or that set the piece within a sort of specific thematic context to endow what really was a generic composition with meaning, and in so doing to make them appealing to a consumer. The composers and the publishing houses gave these composition titles, and they supplied the sheet music with cover illustrations to increase their marketing appeal. In truth, any of these songs associated only titularly with golf could easily and equally have been assigned a title to invoke any other sport, any other pastime, locale, or theme. There is nothing golf specific in the musical composition of the Merry Golfers, nor anything specific to female golfers in the Lady Golfers two-step. It's only the titles and the covers that gave these pieces of music a specific association with the royal and ancient game, and in so doing inspired the golf imagery on the covers. Of particular note are examples of sheet music that associate golf with the rise of the new woman in America and Britain. Sort of generalizing, Victorian women of the mid to late 1800s, and especially those from middle and upper class families, engaged in few activities outside the home. Athletic activities in particular were frowned upon for women among the social elite. And this character of the new woman rose up really as a response to the very limiting roles of wife and mother that were typically assigned to women. Toward the end of the 19th century, women were increasingly remaining unmarried until later in life. They were completing college educations in greater numbers, organizing for women's suffrage, and pursuing professional careers outside the home. Moreover, the new woman, and we see her here in this illustration, I love this image, embraced new fashions. They wore trousers instead of long dresses. They rode bicycles, they drove automobiles, they played tennis. And of course, the boldest and the most confident of the group smoked cigarettes and played golf. Along similar lines, we can take a look here at the American Girl two-step, written by a very celebrated American composer, Victor Herbert, and promoted, as you see at the top, as The Rage of New York. This cover features a very stylish woman dressed in a bold red blouse and hat, a dramatic black and white plaid skirt, toting a golf bag over her right shoulder. This particular example was published in London. So what we're looking at here really is one anonymous British illustrator's interpretation of the typical American woman of the 1890s, energetic, independent, and rushing off to the links. Recognizing that there was surging interest in popular music and appreciating the accelerating sales of sheet music, some major American newspapers licensed the right to reproduce already popular songs as inserts in their Sunday newspapers. Newspaper mogul William Randolph Hearst, one of the great names in the newspaper industry here in the States in the latter half of the 19th century, as early as the 1880s, was one of the first to include supplemental sheet music to boost circulation, as well as to justify an increase in the daily price of the newspaper from 1 cent to 5 cents for the editions that include sheet music inserts. Typically, these inserts were reissues of an already published song, but with a different cover that was created by the newspaper staff. They were printed on cheap and highly acidic paper stock, that is newsprint, that becomes very yellow and brittled with age. And these examples in particular are among the rarest forms of sheet music that we found as part of the project. This particular song, There's Nothing Like a Game of Golf, you see it in its original form published in Chicago in 1900, early 1900, and reissued later that year by the Boston Herald. And turn things over here to Peter in just a moment, but before I do, I just wanted to sort of share a personal anecdote and the story of what happens things that happen in the course of research and writing a book. What you see here on the screen is a photo of the trophy presentation from the 1929 US Open. This is, of course, the legendary Bob Jones accepting the trophy after his victory at Wingfoot. I've seen photos of this trophy presentation dozens, hundreds of times through the years. But this particular photo actually popped up one night. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was on eBay. Little insider secret, this is where museums often find some of their greatest treasures. I found this photo, and I noticed a curious detail that I had never noticed before, which is that pinned to the front of the table, if you look just in front of the trophy, for the ceremony of all things, and it's really curious, is a piece of sheet music, Hail to the Wingfoot, which was a song that was written for and dedicated to the 1929 US Open. And I think, were it not for this book and this project, I never would have noticed that detail before, but really exciting and interesting to see, here in one of the great sort of celebratory moments in American golf history, that of all things, sheet music had as much a presence sort of front and center as the US Open trophy. So with that, now I'm going to turn things over to Peter.
Okay. Right. Well, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to talk about the final third of the book. It focuses on golf songs that were written as part of the scores of stage and film musicals between 1893 and 1939. The lyrics follow very much the same pattern that Rand had described. I mean, they're love songs, they're songs celebrating the game, and so on. But the major difference compared to standalone sheet music is that they were sung by characters within a story. And very often, especially from about 1915 onwards, the songs themselves advance the plot of the show. Furthermore, the sheet music covers were designed to sell both the songs and the shows they were performed in. Let's look very briefly at a few milestones in the history of golf songs on stage and screen. Jane Annie, London, 1893. Well, this was almost certainly the first time that a musical had an act set on the putting green of a golf course. The book and lyrics were written by J.M. Barrie and Arthur Conan Doyle. The plot revolves around the romantic entanglements at a young ladies' seminary or school, and Jane Annie, the student's ability to hypnotize everyone to get her desired outcomes. The first act takes place at night at the school, and the second one on a golf green near the school, where the song Golf was performed by a chorus of young ladies. The Lady Slavey, New York, 1896, was a play that was originally staged in London in 1894. When it was imported to Broadway, it underwent major changes, and I mean major changes, including an entirely new score. One of the new songs was titled, rather imaginatively, Golf Song. This was almost certainly the first time that there was a song devoted to golf sung on Broadway. And moving on a bit, let's come to New Year's Eve, 1923. A musical called Kid Boots opened on Broadway. The entire show was set in various locations at the mythical Everglades Golf Club in Palm Beach, Florida. It was the first Broadway musical totally devoted to golf. The sheet music covers feature a lady golfer, and even the theater programs listed the songs in the show by hole numbers. Eddie Cantor played the title character, who is the club's caddy master and official bootlegger. He specialized in using doctored, lead-weighted golf balls that could not fly straight, so that the members would need to keep coming back for more lessons to correct their swings. Now, up until Kid Boots, there'd been more than 20 shows on Broadway that featured golf songs, but none where golf was the focus of the whole show. Then, 9 months later, on September 1st, 1924, another golf-themed musical called Top Hole opened while Kid Boots was still playing to packed houses. Top Hole was largely set at the fictional Crestwood Country Club in California, and the plot revolves around young Bob's attempt to prove to his father that he is not a wastrel. He undergoes many trials and tribulations, and he redeems himself by winning the club championship, unmasking a thief, and winning the heart of Marcia the heroine. We believe this is the only instance in the long history of Broadway where two musicals devoted to golf were running at the same time. If 1924 was the magical year for golf on Broadway, 1930 was the magical one for golf in Hollywood. While scenes of golf had appeared on the silver screen since the early 1900s, 1930 marked the first year that two musical feature films with golf as the primary storyline came out of Hollywood. Follow Through began life as a Broadway musical in 1929 and tells the story of Laura, the daughter of the local club professional who wins the big match and the heart of the hero Jerry thanks to her prodigious golfing talents. Love in the Rough started life as a straight play on Broadway in 1925 called Spring Fever. MGM turned it into an all-singing, all-dancing movie in 1930. The film revolves around Jack, a municipal golf champion who works as a shipping clerk in a department store. When he says he can cure the owner's slice, Jack is invited to spend 2 weeks at the latter's very exclusive country club in order to do so. However, while there, he falls in love with Marilyn, an heiress, and a multitude of complications follow. It all ends happily. Jack wins the club championship and the approval of Marilyn's father to marry her. Well, I could talk a lot more about stage and screen musicals and the great lyricists who wrote songs for them, like P.G. Woodhouse, Ira Gershwin, and Cole Porter. But we've almost come to the end of our allotted time, so now back to Rand, and I exit again.
Thanks, Peter. Really, we've only been able to give you a small sample of the many stories and the pieces that we were able to feature in Swing Time, a celebration of golf and music 1870 to 1939. What we really hope we've been able to do this evening is to give you an understanding of what really was previously an unexplored and unknown way in which golf expanded so dramatically and entered so closely into popular culture, and how the music of the time really reflected both the evolution of the game, the social history and cultural history of the game, through extraordinary lyrics and really extraordinary cover artwork on these pieces. I'm going to wrap things up here. I'd love to do so just with a pitch. Please buy our book. We're very proud of our book. We think it's an extraordinary contribution to the history of the game. We believe that it opens up many new avenues for golf collectors, for golf historians. We hope that someone will be inspired to sort of take up and pursue some of the questions that I think remain open after the work that Peter and I did over the last 2 years. I'd love to be able to tell you that the book is available through all good booksellers, but the truth is that we're distributing it through 2 specific outlets for folks in the UK. Grant Books, grantbooks.co.uk. I think I have a typo on the screen and I'm missing an S on books, but Grant Books is the exclusive seller of the book in the UK. For folks here in the US, USGAPublications.com. The USGA's online bookstore is the exclusive seller of the book. So we think you'll enjoy it. We hope you come to have a passion for the subject as much as Peter and I did. Importantly, as I wrap things up here, just wanted to say thank you to all of you for spending a little time with us this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you might be. We greatly appreciate your making the effort to join us and as we explore this a really exciting, interesting topic.
Hear, hear.
Wow, thank you so much, Rand and Peter. That was amazing. There's so much to cover there, and you managed to fit it in your allotted time, as you said. And what has struck me is that popular culture element, and the fact that golf was so popular that it was selling songs and films and stage shows is somewhat surprising to to people who are perhaps not embedded in this world. And it's something that I and the museum has tried to put across. But I think you've done it brilliantly there. The artwork is just so striking, and you've only shown a small selection this evening. There's some lovely examples within the book. But I love those images of the new women and the powerful woman being depicted as a golfer in her golf breeches. I know Lauren, who's on the call, who's researching women's golf and women's experience in golf, and probably have enjoyed that. Does anyone have a question for Peter or Rand? Lauren, you've got your hand up first, and Angela. Lauren, do you want to go first?
Yeah, please. Thank you. Yeah, that was fantastic. That was so interesting. Thank you so much for that. I loved that. The images were just beautiful. I was completely taken back by all the imagery. It was amazing. So yeah, as Hannah mentioned, that I'm researching women's golf, and just from the start was struck by the imagery and how women were so present in the imagery. And there was a few questions I came up with as you progressed, and some of them you answered as we went on. But one that really struck me was whether women's participation, it's kind of two questions, whether women's participation was included in the lyrics for some of these songs, as well as the sort of the imagery and the titles. And also I noticed that there was a couple of women that were actually involved in the song. They were mentioned on the sheet music. I think it was maybe they'd written the lyrics or something like that. And I just wondered if you'd come across quite a lot of that, if women were involved in the process as well of writing these pieces of music.
Peter, I'm going to take the second question first.
And then I'll take the first question second.
Then I'll give you time to think about the answer to the first question. So, Lauren, it's a great question. I think one of the things that, and we go into it quite a bit in the book, there's a disproportionate number of the songs were written by female composers. And I think it's exactly this sort of time where, so when I talked about sort of women were taking jobs outside the home for the first time, here in the States, the women's colleges, one of the very few professions that was considered acceptable for women, there were two. One was to be a teacher, to be an educator. The other one was actually music performance and music composition. So the women's seminaries here in the US were actually had very strong programs in music education and music composition for women. And a lot of these composers, and you wish the historical record was more complete, but where you can find records of them, and in the book we have I have profiled a few of them. They were coming from middle and upper class homes. They were being educated. They were performing publicly, and they were writing songs. And it's really interesting to see the golf. So if you think about the number of women who were actually playing golf at the time, I don't know, estimates are probably 10 to 15% of the golf population was female around the turn of the century here in the US. I think close to 50% of the songs were written by women, and maybe 70% of the songs have a female figure on the front cover. So it's a great question. There's absolutely reflective of what was happening sort of socially and culturally at the time.
And I'll give a lyrical answer, and quite literally, because you're asking about this. I mean, we didn't, in the talk just now, we didn't touch really on lyrics in any detail. But I mean, if you take some of the golf songs you get, for example, in a show called Hodgepodge & Co. on Broadway in 1900, there's a song called The Gay Golf Girl. On the links where meadowlarks welcome the sun, the golf girl is waiting to greet them. Never thinking of others who come one by one, she knows she can easily beat them. And on it goes. And there are quite a few in a Chinese honeymoon, which is London 1901, you've got one that's really a great reference because it's they're singing about trendy young ladies in England, America, Scotland, and France in a song called The Allah Girl. And the Scottish, when they describe the Scottish girl, they sing, the Allah girl is a sporting girl. She loves the breezy moor. She adores a game of golf a la AJ Balfour. So there you've got the double reference, not only to Scottish girl playing golf very well, but of course to AJ Balfour, one of the leading figures in the helping make the game popular in Britain, not to mention also the fact he was prime minister during the run of that particular show. And there are a lot of flirting songs with boys and girls, men and women. Lord Cheney, you can, if you want an excuse for a walk, Ada, golf's the excuse for a walk. If to a lady you're burning to talk, golf's not the subject you talk. Oh, the glorious game is golf. And this happens quite often with love songs, flirting songs. Women are very much to the fore. There's a wonderful P.G. Wodehouse lyric from the Cabaret Girl in 1922 in London, where the men are all extolling the virtues of the local golf course and the local pro who's going to get them playing like Cyril Tolley, the amateur champion. And the girls respond, we'll come and caddy for you. And if good shot you should do with your cleek and putter, we'll give 3 cheers. But if you do a fozzle or a slice, why then by mother's advice to the words you utter, we'll shut our ears.
Peter, I'm going to jump in here, and I grabbed the screen back and I pulled this up. It's one of my favorite pieces on the right, Captain of the Golf Club. This is 1902. I love this piece. Actually, if you can read on the screen, it was dedicated to the USGA when it was written. It's 3 verses, and they each profile a sort of stereotypical character that you would find on the golf course. So it opens with the college man, so the hot shot, college, he's supposed to be sort of the ace of the club, but hits and it references the Haskell ball, which I love. Hits the ball so far and most often offline that he has terrible scores. So boastful, arrogant, proud, but and full of self-confidence, but really not a great golfer. The captain of the golf club, nominally, right, the title character in the song, the older gentleman, the esteemed and revered character, who in the verse talks about sort of noble qualities and characteristics of the game, including humility, while at the same time telling you how fantastic he is. So a lovely ironic sort of verse where his words actually undermined his claims. And of course, the real heroine of the story in all of it is the summer girl. And it turns out she is the one with the best game and the best sort of representation of the values and the traditions and the respect and character that I think anyone would want to see. And I love how the 3 figures in this particular song are set up for 3 very strong and very different characters, but the female really ends up being, again, the best representation of the game's value and character and spirit. So it's a song to look for. I really like that one.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, just great. It was great to see women so present as well, and quite surprising, I think. So thank you very much. I'll be sure to get the book. I'm intrigued. I want to know more. So
Thanks, Lauren. Angela, did you have a question?
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you very, very much, Rand and Peter. I think that, the 2 of you are absolutely right to be proud of what you've achieved, because it's taken our knowledge of golf and golf history into a completely new area, and to produce groundbreaking research like this is absolutely wonderful for all of us. It's what it brings to all of us, and yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. And like Lauren and Hannah, just the artwork, the design is incredible, and it's just an absolute joy to see it. So my question is for Rand. So how did the USGA acquire the collection, and are there any plans to do anything with it in terms of maybe having an exhibition?
So I mentioned, I think so when I started as a late teenager, 18, 19, 20 years old, there were probably 25 or 30 pieces in the collection. They were intriguing, but didn't really understand a whole lot about them. Through the years, had opportunities to acquire, one or two small collection. I'll say we grew the collection by 50 or 20 pieces at a time. And we didn't talk about it, this is, I've looked at this project for 10 or 15 years. I've never found the time, and then COVID hit. Honestly, this project would not have happened. This is one of the blessings of COVID, you found yourself having time, more time than you ever had. And I think to preserve some, humanity and to have some focus in the early disruptive weeks and months of COVID, I said, I'm going to dig into this. And very quickly, so at that point, there were probably 75 pieces in the collection. Within 6 months, between eBay, booksellers, word of mouth. I see he's on the call, but he's not on the screen. Phil Kostelnick, who's a longtime friend and a longtime member of the USGA Museum Committee. Phil had an extraordinary collection that we acquired from Phil for the USGA Museum, and in fact, Phil, I'm pretty sure the captain of the golf club came from your collection. So Angela, really it was opportunistic. And booksellers, like I did a lot, again, it was COVID, I did a lot online, and I think the material was readily available because no one was looking for it. It was sitting there kind of untouched. So it was easy to very quickly amass a pretty significant collection. At the same time, we were doing that, so some of what we have is a digital archive, reaching out to libraries, universities, finding online resources. Peter had, given his family's history in show business and theater and Hollywood, all of the pieces that come from film and theater were from Peter's collection. Peter, I think you've amassed over 30 years, right?
About 15.
Sort of piece by piece, putting that all together. So I know it's just COVID allowed it to happen. And again, I think I was amazed at how much was just sort of sitting there available and untouched, because it wasn't on anyone's radar to even think about it or look for it. So opportunistic. I think some of the USGA is building a new campus down in Pinehurst. It's going to open in 2024. It's going to include gallery space for the museum collection. And so, Angela, to your question, we're going to do rotating temporary exhibits for probably 6 months at a time or a year down in Pinehurst. And I do want to do an exhibition of the sheet music. So we'll put it on display publicly and sort of celebrate it a little bit more there. I'm also hoping that we can put together some performances of the music. So it's wonderful to see it. It's another thing to hear it. And so if we can commission some musicians either to make some recordings of some of the pieces, or I'd love to do it as a concert, to have a night of golf and music and stage some productions. So finally, let me just say, let's keep in touch, because I think there's some great opportunities that we could do together for the R&A World Golf Museum and the USGA Museum to do something interesting around this.
As Rand just mentioned, I've kind of got a good collection, not very far from where you're sitting right now. And there's you can tell from the photo credits, which came from mine, but I've got a reasonable overlap with some the USGA pieces for the stage and screen stuff. It was just much easier for them to photograph their stuff rather than me doing my photographic bit. So you and I can also talk.
Indeed, fantastic. Thank you. Lots of exciting opportunities coming up. It sounds
I haven't even
great.
touched on theater programs.
I'm watching that space.
Yes, please.
I'm gonna jump back in and steal the screen again since I just referenced it. So within the last week, I actually went through the book and I searched on YouTube for recordings of the songs, and I put together a playlist. I actually found recordings of 29 of the songs that are in the book. Apologies, they're of varying quality. You have to endure the ads that pop up on YouTube, but if you go onto YouTube and do a search for swing time early golf music, you'll find the playlist I put together. So if you do want to listen to some of these pieces, say about half of it are the Broadway and Hollywood from the Broadway and Hollywood scores, and about half of it are some of the standalone pieces. So if you do want to hear it, this is the best we can do at this point. But
yeah, in fact,
get that concert organized.
There's even more than Rand found. If you're looking at complete shows in the sense of if you want to get a feel for what the score of Follow Through was like, or the score of Kid Boots, etc. And I put together some lists. There's at least 3 CDs that I have of P.G. Woodhouse, Jerome Kern songs. Obviously not all of them are golf, but the 3 or 4 of the golf songs are on those. And again, if you start diving into show titles as opposed to song titles, you'll start getting hits for the individual shows. I mean, one of my favorite is Cole Porter's The New Yorkers. The Great Indoors is just such a fabulous song when you listen to it on YouTube.
Oh, thank you for collating that list, because I think that's the one thing that I would, a lecture like this, we want to hear the songs, and so that can be some homework for us all, is to go away and listen to the playlist, and then yes, Peter, it would be good to get your full list as well. I would like to see some of those early films, and I think when you first brought or I saw the films, I tried to search for them, but they're not all available, are they?
Love in the Rough, Warner's released that on DVD.
Okay.
Follow Through has been released at different times, and those are the 2 major films. And of course, you compare the pretty anemic dance in Love in the Rough. You watch the scene of that in one of the golf songs and compare it to Fred Astaire's dance in Carefree, and it's pales in comparison. But there's a lot of hitting and missing, and but you can find these things if you look for them.
If I'm up at 3 a.m. on eBay, like Rand.
Not for me at 3 a.m. It's more likely to be about 11:30 at night or about 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
As Rand got used to waking up to emails, I just found another 5 golf lyrics.
Does anyone else have a question before we round up the evening? Oh, yes, sir. Do you want to go ahead? Then they were.
Okay. It's not so much a question, but an observation, and it's probably not the sort of thing you want to hear when you've just published a book. But if you don't know it, I can offer a bit of information. Can you bring back the trio that you had up for quite a long time a few minutes ago? It started off with the Macrahanish.
Sure.
It was on screen for quite a while.
Yep.
That's it.
Yes.
Okay, the middle one there, the Golfer's Garland, you'll see it's dedicated to the Edinburgh Burgess Golfing Society. Do you know the location that's shown there?
Oh, no.
No.
No, I know that that song has a very long history going back.
Mm. Well, if you're sell extremely well with this edition, you might bring out a second edition. That is the centre of Edinburgh. It's a golf course called Bruntsfield Links, where golf has been played for over 400 years. It's still played today, but all through the Victorian era, housing encroached on it. So they gave up the full game. The Burgess Society moved elsewhere, and they now play the short version. It's a 36-hole course, but very short. Often in this country, people use the phrase pitch and putt. And I said that to one of the members once and got roundly told off. This is not pitch and putt, he said. This is short hole golf. And they're very strict on that. They actually founded their club in 1890 when the full golf moved away, and it's still active today. And the reason you can place it exactly, that rounded mountain in the back is in the very center of Edinburgh. It's called Arthur's Seat, and it's an extinct volcano. And it has many features of volcanic action clearly visible. And the reason I can tell you all this is that that scene is less than 100 yards from my front door. I live on a one-sided street looking onto Bruntsfield Links, and literally 3 steps out of my front door, I'm on the links, and another 2 or 3 dozen steps, and I'm on that precise location. And the other thing you might be interested in is the date. I've seen this sheet music in a collection in the National Library of Scotland, and I don't believe it's dated, but the one I saw had a manuscript annotation. You see, it's anonymous. It's by an old member who doesn't give a name. Well, he signed this one to a friend, and if I recollect correctly, the date is 1887 or thereby. So if you ever get a second edition on the go, I'd be happy to supply with these precise details.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's great information about the illustration. The song exists. It was published in a couple. It's in Clark's Golf or Royal and Ancient Game. It's actually in the earlier Clark Poems on Golf from the 1840s. Actually was able to trace it through 2 or 3 variations. It's in the Ludi Apollinaris compilation, Carmina Mariorum. And according to that text, the song was found originally in this. The words were first in the stall of an Edinburgh bookseller. And there's some suggestion that the song itself and the lyrics may actually go back to the 1700s. But then it was sort of set to music in the 1870s with the publication of this particular piece. So, you know, the poem and the words go further back, but the musical composition comes later, and then the sheet music is published.
Golfer's Garland, yeah, that's also in the 4th edition of Carnegie, the 1862 version of it.
Yeah. But love the information on the illustration. That's super fun. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, I know I spoke for a few minutes there. Hannah, am I permitted to ask a question?
Yes.
But just before you got onto that amazing array of sheet music covers, the verse, the green gown, no, don't worry, Rand, I'm not going to press you on the details because you nicely skimmed over them. But I noticed that golf was bracketed with other pursuits. trap, keels, barley breck or a name like that. Were these other pastimes all ball games? And in their day, did they have any equality or parity with golf itself?
I'll take this one, Rand.
Yep.
Much more research needs to be done. On part of this, because as Rand said, thus all our life long we are gay and frolicking gay, which is the alternate title for the song, went through a number of different editions, and there are text variations in each of the editions. It gets really, really complicated. I don't have it in front of me. And the names of the different other sports change. So you don't get the consistency of trap, keels, barley break, stew ball. The only one I can't remember whether it's a ball game is barley break. Trap and keels are ball, I think, are ball games. Stew ball is definitely a ball game. They're all sticking ball games of different kinds, but no, much more work needs to be done on the song and on the different sports that are listed in the different editions of the song, if that makes sense.
Indeed.
So I'm sort of giving you a non-answer to say that watch this space.
No, that's been very informative. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of work needs to be done, and we just didn't have time on this pass round to get into the complexities of that particular song and its amazing history.
Well, that's interesting. Thank you, Peter.
That's wonderful. Anyone else with a question? Yes, Mark.
First of all, I want to commend both authors. You know, this has been a wonderful presentation that you've done. And it strikes me, it's so representative of the current world, the cross-cultural aspect. Here we are in various continents, and you've done it so beautifully, the evolution of this. And it's marvelous to capture all the detail while it's still available. So I'm really not a great golfer. I'm more in tennis, and I played at Queen's in London, and they have real golf there, and I like to real tennis, excuse me, which you know is played with a great big curved net. My wife today is intrigued by the current fad, which is pickleball. As my son said, it's tennis for midgets. So you see the evolution of things. And that's marvelously captured. But in particular, I have a personal note, and I have a copy of the book here. And on page 279, there's a cover for Pretty Please, which is a comedy with music in 3 acts by the Puff and Powder Club of Kenyon College in 1921. As it happens, I attended Kenyon College undergraduate. And the thing about Kenyon College, the cover art shows a young woman in a calico skirt swinging away. And Kenyon College is a tiny little university, especially for those Scots. It's off in the woods of Ohio. And at that stage, in fact, until I attended there, it was a men's college. So what Lauren's question about women coming up, it's fascinating that there's a woman on this artwork, whereas it's a men's college in the woods of Ohio, tiny little place. And here we have a golf tribute here. So anyway, so it's just referencing the evolution culturally of what this book represents. That's really all I had to say. Thanks.
Well, thank you. And we won't mention any of our games at Queen's Club way back when.
May I just mention for Mark's benefit, if you ever do make it to Scotland and get to St Andrews, barely a dozen miles away, there is a live real tennis court. A tiny village called Falkland has a palace, and it was one of the royal abodes when there was still a Scottish monarchy. And they still have their tennis court in working condition. So you can tie in golf and tennis in one day.
But beware, it doesn't have a roof.
That's right.
Got to deal with the weather.
Okay, anyone else wants to say anything or?
Yes, please.
Yes, Matthias?
Just regarding for Brunsfield Link short hole course, I've sent you all a photo in the chat on the bottom row. If you haven't seen it, it's really a nice short hole course to play. I've only been there once with Neil Laird. He's also a historian from Edinburgh. I met him nearly every time when I spent some time in Scotland. And it's really interesting to playing there. And gentlemen, thank you very much for the lecture. For me as musician for almost 30 years, it was very interesting. I really have to say I had only once a small inspiration to write a song about golf, but I never finished it.
Well, you know what you have to do now, Matthias.
I will try to do.
And then when you're in St Andrews next, we'll have a performance.
And that will be in volume 3 of Swing Time.
Yeah, I suppose that would be my next question. Will there be a vol 2 and vol 3?
Good question. That's the kind of question that needs asked. Yes, I mean, these are sort of things that people have to bring to our attention. And thank you for that question.
Yes, and good night. Very good. Well, I want to thank everybody again for attending, but most of all, thank you, Rand and Peter. A remarkable piece of research and a wonderful lecture for us. I'm delighted that you were able to do this, and we have the capacity to do so, and it's recorded for anyone that hasn't been able to attend this evening, so do tell your friends. But let's do a round of applause on Zoom to our wonderful speakers this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity
Yes.
to share our work and our passion. It is a great honor for me to work with Peter on this project over the last 2 years. I'll always be grateful to him. When I think back on COVID and the COVID years, I'll think of Peter and Swing Time rather than all of the challenges, and just grateful for the friendship that was formed between the two of us.
Absolutely.
As we worked on this.
Oh, that's lovely. Oh.
Thank you, Rand. It's been epic. It's been a lot of fun. We hope that we've given you just a little sample and you start to get the idea of there's a lot of fun things in the book. There's a lot of serious heavy duty prose, but there's also a lot of good fun things in there.
Yeah. And hopefully we get some performances. Don't
want me singing.
Yes. Thank you everyone again for coming. Oh, I think I'm echoing. But thank you again for a lovely evening, and hope to see you again at future events.
Okay, well, bye-bye. Thank you.